All right. So let's welcome to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is going to be about detecting intruders on the wire. So we've secured the perimeter and hardened the interior systems. Now we need visibility. We need to see what is actually traveling across our cables. So in this chapter, we're going to master the IDS and the IPS and the art of network traffic analysis. So our missions for today is first we need to be able to differentiate the difference between an IDS and an IPS. Second, we'll compare the network IDS versus the host-based IDS. And then third, we'll explain the two different detection methods, the signature-based and anomaly-based. Then we'll get a little hands-on with some PCAP, traffic analysis, and then finally we'll identify the major challenge posted by, well, encrypted traffic. So to understand these tools, we're going to use an analogy. The firewall is the bouncer at the door checking IDs. The IDS, the detection system, is the security camera. It records the crime and alerts you when someone breaks a window, but it doesn't physically stop them. The IPS, on the other hand, the prevention system, he's the guard dog. It detects the intruder and attacks or stops them immediately. It takes action. So let's look at the IDS first. This is a passive monitoring tool. It monitors network traffic, looking for suspicious activity. If it sees an attack, it alerts the admin. It will send an email or a logging of an event. It will alert the admin in a certain fashion. Now, crucially, it does not stop the packet. It simply yells fire when the house burns. Now, the IPS. Now, the IPS itself is an active defense. It sits in line with the traffic flow, acting like a checkpoint. If it sees an attack, it blocks the packet immediately. The danger here is if it makes a mistake, it's a false positive. It can block legitimate traffic, potentially taking your business offline. Now here's the breakdown. An IDS is an out of band. It watches a copy of traffic, while the IPS is an inline in the flow. So the IDS blocks while the IDS alerts while the IPS blocks. Sorry, excuse me. Now the IDS itself is going to add zero latency. Okay. The IPS is going to add a slight latency because it must inspect all the packets before it lets them pass. Now, if an IDS crashes, traffic will still flow, so it feels open. But if an IPS crashes, traffic will stop. It feels closed. So where do we put these sensors? First, there's the network intrusion detection system, network-based. We like to put these at strategic points, like just behind a firewall, watching the wire. You'll see the traffic for the entire subnet. It's an excellent for detecting and scanning in broad attacks across many computers. Now the problem here is it can't see encrypted traffic. Because it's on the wire, internal activity is happening inside of, well, a specific PC. So we can't see if it's encrypted. Now, on the other hand, we have the host-based intrusion detection system. This is software installed directly on the servers or the laptops. It sees only what happens on that one device. It can see encrypted data because it's decrypted on the host. And system file changes also can be seen here. Now, the con here is it's going to use additional CPU and RAM. So you need to install it everywhere within your systems, but know that it will slow down the end user's computers. So which one of these do you use? Well, we use a network intrusion detection system for perimeter defense and spotting network scanners. We'll use host intrusion detection systems on our critical servers, mobile laptops that leave the building. Now, the best practice? Use both. Defense in depth requires visibility on the network level and even the host level. So you may ask yourself, how do they actually detect attacks? Well, the first method is going to be the signature-based method. Think of this as a wanted poster. It compares the traffic against a database of known attack patterns. In our example, if the packet contains the word cmd.exe, it may say, hey, there's an alert. Now it's very fast and accurate because of it knows the threat already exists. But the problem with signature-based is it's blind to new, unknown zero-day attacks because it doesn't have a signature for them yet. Now the second method that we use is called anomaly-based. Now this looks at the pattern of life. It learns what normal is, and we like to call this a baseline. It alerts us on any deviations from that baseline. For example, this server usually sends about 5 megabytes of data. Today it sent 500 gigabytes. Well, something's not right here, so it's going to alert us. Now, it's really good because it can catch new, unknown attacks. But the problem is it's prone for false positives. You know, if someone legitimately transferred some large files off of there, it may trigger an alarm, especially when it's not something they do every day. So this brings us to the boy who cried wolf problem. It's the false positives problem. The system thinks it's an attack, but it's actually benign traffic. Now this is our nightmare. If the IDS generates 1,000 alerts a day, and 999 of them are false, the analyst will ignore the one real attack. So this is where the process of adjusting rules is necessary to help reduce the noise, and we like to call that tuning. On the flip side, we also have false negatives, and this is what we like to call the silent killer. There is an attack, but the system stays quiet. This happens when signatures are outdated or the traffic is obfuscated. You think you're safe, but you're not. So now let's look at how do we read the digital leaves, okay? Let's look at traffic analysis. And so the anatomy of a packet itself. To analyze traffic, you must understand what the packet is. We need to understand the header, which is the envelope. This contains the metadata like the source, destination, and port. This is normally visible to the routers. We need to also know the payload, the actual data itself. Passwords, emails, images, whatever they may be. This is where all the secrets live. Now in the diagram, you can see that the TCP header fields like source and destination are here. Okay? This is what a traditional packet looks like in a TCP packet. Now, how do we capture these packets? Well, we have to use a method called sniffing. Now, there's two different things in sniffing that we'll do. For one, our network devices need to be in promiscuous mode. Normally, a network card ignores traffic that's not meant for it. In this mode, this card will capture everything passing on the wire. So if you put it in promiscuous mode, it will capture everything. And where does it save that information to? Well, it's going to save it to what we call a PCAP file. Now, this is a standard format for recording network traffic, so we can replay PCAP files and investigate incidents after they have happened. So the tools of the trade. Here are some of the tools that you can use. One of them is called TCP dump. It's a command line tool. It's fast, lightweight. It's great for servers. Built by default in most Linux operating systems, so we like to use it there. Now, if we want a GUI, we can use Wireshark. Now, this is the industry standard for deep analysis and visualization. Highly recommend getting familiar with Wireshark, no matter which field of IT you get into. And the other tool is going to be Snort. And Snort's an open source IDS engine that will help us perform real-time analysis. And in this class, if you're taking this class in person, you will actually install most of these and go through these by hand. Now, Deep Packet Inspection, DPI, is a modern defense, okay? DPI basically says, hey, I'm going to look further into this, because traditional filtering only looks at the header port. DPI is going to look at the payload. It can distinguish between legitimate web traffic and something like maybe a SQL injection attack hiding inside a web request. So Deep Packet Inspection can go further into it than just looking for basic information like, is it coming from a malicious server? But there's always going to be a problem for us, especially as a defender, and that's encryption. Encryption is good. It protects users' privacy. But encryption is bad for us because it blinds the IDS and IPS. If the payload is encrypted, the IDS can't see the malware or the stolen credit cards inside. In reality, we just can't inspect what you can't read. So the solution normally is what we call SSL inspection. This is a man in the middle, the good kind of a man in the middle, where the corporate firewall decrypts the traffic, inspects it with the IDS, re-encrypts it, and sends it on. Now this is very, very heavy for processing, and we have to have very good privacy policies here so we don't inspect certain things like banking websites, something that's illegal. Another detection tool is a honeypot. So a decoy system that's designed to look vulnerable, but really contains no real value. It's basically to lure in those attackers. No legitimate users should ever touch the honeypot, mainly because, well, any activity on the honeypot is a confirmed attack. It really does have zero false positives. So we like using honeypots to catch the attackers who are just snooping around. So let's look at a war story. The silent exfiltration. This is a story about what happens when alarms are ignored. So a major retailer was hacked. Attackers installed malware on the point of sale registers. Their expensive IDS system did detect the malware, and it did fire alerts. The security team was overwhelmed by false positives. They simply just didn't see the real alert because it was hidden in the noise. So our lesson here is definitely to be like, well, let's tune your IDS. It's just as important as buying one. So let's get our hands dirty with the Lab 5.1 Wireshark hunt. So we've captured some traffic from a suspicious employee, Bob, and we suspect he's using an insecure FTP server. So our mission is to open the PCAP file in Wireshark and find Bob's username and password. So your steps here are going to be open up the PCAP file, filter for FTP traffic, and look for anything that says request user and request pass. FTP sends credentials in clear text, so you should be able to see the password right to the screen. And here's a pro tip for the lab, the easy button. Reading a packet by hand is hard. If you right click on it and say follow TCP stream, Wireshark will reconstruct the entire conversation into readable text. Red is the client and blue is the server. It makes analysis so much faster, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're trying to even troubleshoot something in the real world when you're trying to say, hey, did it do a TCP handshake? SYNAC, ACK. Okay, it did. Good. Well, the only way to know that is if you follow the TCP stream. TCP stream does a really good job of finding this information. All right, so that was chapter 5. We now know the difference between an IDS and an IPS. Remember, one's passive and one is active. We know signatures are fast and good for known threats, but blind to zero-day attacks. We can detect unknown threats using anomalies, but it's prone to false positives. And then we can see traffic using PCAP or flows to defend the network to help us have visibility. And we can now even use tools like Wireshark. And encryption is one of those double-edged sword because it hides attacks and requires inspections. So sometimes it's good, but when it's trying to be for malicious intent, sometimes it's harder for us to detect. So thank you for your attention. If there's any questions about packet analysis or IDS tuning, give me a holler. Otherwise, I'll see you for the next chapter, Chapter 6, Malware Analysis.